This part we are going to look at the concept of food chain as well as food web. What is the difference between food chain and food web? Based on this picture, you can easily tell food chain, it consists only of one path. So you can see it's only one way. So it's the pathway of energy transfer from one trophic level to another trophic level, and it shows a linear feeding relationship. Whereas for food web, it's a web. That's why it shows interconnection of several food chains. Not just one food chain, but there are many food chains interconnected, and that forms a web. So instead of linear feeding relationship, in a food web, it shows an interconnected feeding relationship. And this makes the food web more realistic. Why? Because an organisms, they can occupy more than one trophic levels. A food web, they contains many food chains. We don't just consume one type of food, we consume many different type of food, and that makes us to be in different food chains, and that's why food web is more true in the real world. And we have two types of food chains. These are the types of food chains. We have one that we call the grazing food chain, another one we have detritus food chain. How is the grazing food chain different from detritus food chain? All depends on the first organism that starts. In the grazing food chain, it always starts with the producers, either green plants or green algae, as long as they are the producers. And where do they get the energy from? Is from the sun, as you can see here. Sun as the primary source of energy in the grazing food chain. We have two types of grazing food chain. Both of them starts with producers and get the energy from the sun. The common one, we have predatory food chain. Another one, we call it the parasite food chain. How can we tell if one food chain is predatory or parasite? All depends on whether in the food chain there's the presence of parasite. In this picture here, this is apparently a predatory food chain. Why? Because there is no parasite in this food chain. But if in this food chain it suddenly appears to have a parasite, let's say lice, then this must be a parasite food chain. On the other hand, the detritus food chain, it does not start with producers, but it starts with the detritus, which means the dead organisms. Maybe they are the dead leaves or the animal waste. How can they get the energy? It's not from the sun, but from the detritus, the dead organisms. The last thing that you need to learn in this part is the trophic level. What is it, a trophic level? It is the position of an organism in a food chain or a food web. For example, we start with the producer as the first trophic level, and then the herbivore being at the second place, that's the second trophic level. And further up, we have the third trophic level, and the last one, the fourth trophic level over here. Usually in a food chain, it does not contain more than 4 or 5 trophic levels. If not, the food chain will become unstable. How many trophic levels do we have in this food chain? The answer will be 4. What about decomposer? Decomposer is on its own. They have its own trophic level, so we do not consider it as the trophic level in the food chain. That's why the number of trophic level in this food chain is only 4 and not 5, because decomposer is on its own.